MetalJesusRocks here, and this is a really special, fun pickups video for me because this month I ended up adding 24 games to one particular console. And I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet, but I think you're going to like it. It's got some cool stuff, so let's go. So this month I added games to 9 different gaming systems, and I'm going to save that big one towards the end because it's pretty fun and it might take a little time to get through it. So let's get on to the other ones. And the first one up here is for the original NES. It is a light gun shooter called Freedom Force. And I've actually been into light gun games lately, and or I guess the Zapper is what this was called. And been looking for this for a while. It's kind of fun to find it. Only paid a couple dollars for it. Next up, for the Super Nintendo, I got a couple RPGs. One of them is Wizardry 5. And I like the Wizardry games. They're old school, and this is going to be fun to play. I haven't played it before. Looking forward to it. Next up for the Super Nintendo is Eye of the Beholder. And this ties into another game I've got coming up a little bit later for the iPad. Eye of the Beholder is a classic advanced Dungeons & Dragons game, kind of a dungeon crawler, and can't wait to dig into this. I used to play this on the PC. As a matter of fact, I think I still have the PC version somewhere. For the Dreamcast, I got 2 kind of random games I just happened to stumble upon. One of them I did a fairly in-depth review for, and that is Expendable. And this is a pretty fun sort of 3D shoot 'em up. In this game, shit blows up real well, and so if you're interested in this game, and it's not very expensive, and it's a lot of fun, so definitely check this out for the Dreamcast. Next up for the Dreamcast is a puzzler called Wetrix Plus, and I know this came out, I believe, on the Nintendo 64 and the PC. And this is a really interesting sort of Tetris-like game in 3 dimensions with water. And if you can imagine, it's kind of bizarre. I'm not sure if I like it or not. I need to play it a little bit more, I think. For the PlayStation 2, I kind of went crazy and bought a bunch of games for. First up is Burnout 2. And you may be wondering, why the heck did I buy Burnout 2? I used to own this back in the day. But my plan is actually to do an entire Burnout retrospective. And so I've been going and rebuying some of these original games, even though they're okay. But I want to include those, obviously, in the retrospective. And so you got to include Burnout 2. It's not a bad game. Actually, the best part of this one is, I believe, Crash Mode. But I haven't played it so long, I don't even remember. Here's an RPG called Demon Stone. And the reason why this was in my list to buy is because it's written by R.A. Salvatore, who is the very famous Forgotten Realms writer who created Drizzt. And love that character. I have a bunch of his books, and I heard that he wrote this game, and I was like, I had to get it. So I'm looking forward to playing that. Here's another RPG called Champions of Norath, and I guess this is based in the EverQuest world. So this should be pretty interesting. It's by the people who did Baldur's Gate for the consoles, sort of like top-down view. Should be pretty fun to play. I plan on doing a light gun sort of retrospective special for the PlayStation 2 at some point, and so I've been looking for light gun games. I've been kind of in that mood lately, and I picked up 2 for it. Resident Evil Dead Aim. Played a little bit of this and actually was pleasantly surprised with it, so I'm going to include that in that sort of compilation video that I do. And then here's a generic case one, because it's the only one I could find, is Time Crisis 2. I already have the 3rd. And when I do that light gun video, I need to find the final game for that sort of compilation, which would be Vampire Knight. And I'm having a hard time finding that game. I'm not sure why. It's not like it's expensive, but locally in Seattle, I just can't seem to find it. So I may have to buy it online or something like that. But it's called Vampire Knight, so that's the next game I'm looking for the light gun. And finally, a game that I thought was for the light gun, but it's not, and that is Silent Scope 2. And I don't know why this doesn't support the Guncom, you know, that orange light gun. It's kind of blows my mind. You have to use the controller for this, which seems really stupid. So a little disappointed in this game, but I think I paid $1 for it. Next up is the Genesis, and as some of you may know, I recently got a Genesis, or the Mega Drive in Europe, from a friend of mine, and I didn't own one back in the day, and I like the controller for it. The controller's big and it fits really well in my hands, but I'm not crazy about the D-pad. So I found out that they have an arcade stick, and so I had to buy one. And this is actually pretty cool. It's a full-on industrial strength arcade, stick. Really nice big buttons on it. And I've been playing a lot of Genesis games with this, and very happy I invested the 20 bucks for this. So if you are a Genesis owner and looking for a joystick replacement, this is a pretty nice alternative. Games for the Genesis, I got Skitchin, which is like a skateboarding game. I haven't played it a whole lot, but I'm looking forward to it. Some people say it's really good. Next up is Comics Zone. I guess this is another classic for the Genesis, and played a little bit of this, and I really like the art style. It's very cool. A shooter I got, because since I was getting the arcade stick, I wanted a really good shooter, and that is Lightning Force. And I actually played quite a bit of this, and I think this game is really cool, really fun. A lot of depth to it, and just crazy stuff going on the screen. Great time with that. Next up is the classic Genesis 6-pack. This is a compilation cartridge, and it includes Sonic the Hedgehog, Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, Revenge of Shinobi, Columns, and Super Hang-On. And for $5, it seems like a really good deal. Next up is a game, California Games, and I used to have this on the Commodore 64, and played it a little bit. It's a compilation of sort of like Southern California games like Hacky Sack, and there's there's Half Pipe. What else is there? There's surfing, stuff like that. Some of them are better than others, but it's still fun to have. Finally, I've been in the mood for a lot of RPG games, as you can tell here. And I needed to get the classic for the Genesis, which is Phantasy Star 4. And this is hard to find as well, and I just happened to find it in the box. And the guy didn't have the manual for it, so I'm kind of disappointed, because this game needs the manual, in my opinion, because I've been playing it lately. And some of the magic spells are abbreviations, and I have no idea what they mean, so I need to track down a manual for this game. It's even hard to find a manual online that is sort of, a scanned copy of a manual. So that's Phantasy Star 4. Next up, for the iPad, I got a couple games this month that I thought I'd share with you that I think are pretty good and worth your time and money. The first one is Air Attack HD. And this is an old school 3D top-down shooter, kind of like maybe Tiger Heli or maybe 1942. The graphics are fantastic on it. It's super fun to play. There's a bunch of different difficulty levels, so if you're not very good at those games, you can put it on easy mode and still have a great time. And as someone who's played a lot of these games, I have a little hint for you, and that is if you're struggling with your finger on the glass a lot, what you can do as a little trick is actually wrap your finger in a napkin, and that way the sort of finger smudge and grease doesn't sort of slow you down on the glass, and actually helps quite a bit with a game like that. Next up is Pinball HD, and this is a $1 game, really cheap, lots of fun. It has 3 different tables, and the physics feel really good on it, and there's a lot of depth to it. I'm not great at pinball games, as you can kind of see here, but if you're sitting in a doctor's office and you want a quick game of pinball, it's perfect for it. And then finally is, speaking of, because I mentioned earlier, the Eye of the Beholder, and that's what I was referring to was this game on the iPad and the iPhone. This is actually an iPhone game that I've just blown up here, but it's called Undercroft. Undercroft. And essentially what it is an Eye of the Beholder kind of game that's completely free. In this game, I put probably 7 hours into it so far, and I'm maybe only halfway through. It's massive. And if you're an old school gamer like me and you like those Eye of the Beholder games, man, go to the App Store, download this. It's free, it's super fun, it's really detailed, lots of story and quests to do, and just a blast to play. Alright, and finally, I added 24 games to my Atari 2600, and I already had probably, I forget how many it was, but I had quite a few that I've just sort of slowly been gathering over the time. But I walked into a store recently, and this guy was he just had a corner of his store, and they were all for basically $1. And it was just in the mood. I was like, man, I just want to pick up every single title that I don't have, that maybe I've never heard of, or I used to have as a kid, or I just want to complete my collection. So I actually added 24 games in one day, and it was pretty fun. And I added a bunch of stuff I just had no idea about. Some of them I used to have as a kid, but for instance, Time Pilot. Time Pilot for the Atari 2600 is incredibly rare. Now this game frankly sucks. It's a terrible version of Time Pilot, but I was shocked to see when I got home that this game starts at $50 on eBay, and there are some sales that have closed around $100 for Time Pilot, which is crazy, but the fact that I got it for $1, pretty cool. Another thing I learned when buying these games is that I didn't realize this, but Atari released more games at the end of the cycle. For instance, you know, the Atari 2600 came out in 1978 or something like that, and it really started picking up steam in 1981, you know, 1980, 1982, and that's whenever I had one as a little kid. But then it just kind of died away. You know, people got a Commodore 64, or you know, later on they got a Nintendo in a Master System. And I didn't realize that Atari kept making games for it. And so some of these games are available and pretty easy to find in stores. And one of those is Solaris. Now this game was released in 1987, which is crazy to me. And it's actually probably one of the most advanced Atari 2600 games that you can find. And it's amazing. Like, it's got maps, it's got multiple levels, it's got, you know, a planetary level. It's really amazing to play. So I was very happy to get that. Another game that came out in 1989, which I had no idea Atari was releasing games at that time, where they are really trying to push the limits of that hardware. I mean, this is after the Atari 5200 and even the 7800. They were still pumping out these old games. And that's another game called you know, Secret Quest. So Solaris and Secret Quest are two kind of unusual Atari games that I got recently. A classic that I also added to my collection is Pitfall 2. This is one of my all-time favorite Atari 2600 games. This is a fantastic game, light years ahead of every other game on the Atari 2600. And as a matter of fact, it kind of made me think I need to do a best of the Atari 2600 list. And so I'm going to do a video for that very soon, just sort of showing what are my all-time favorite games for this system. A game I used to have as a kid, Chopper Command, another really fun title. I actually didn't own a copy of Missile Command, and I don't know what the hell's wrong with me. I have it on other systems, but I needed it to get it on the Atari 2600 again, and it's still really fun to play. Freeway by Activision, a fairly simple game, but yet a lot of fun to play. Megaforce, which I believe is based on a Chuck Norris movie, and I don't know how to play it. I don't know what's going on in this game. It's really weird, but kind of fun to collect. Super Cobra is another game that I used to have as a kid, and a lot of fun. And then just some random sort of stuff, like Riddle of the Sphinx, Stampede, Carnival, Journey, Escape, that's the band Journey, which is pretty scary, Commando Raid, Vanguard, Solar Fox, Space Cavern, a game based on the TV show or movie MASH. That's kind of odd to me, but it was in the collection, so I bought it. And then just a bunch of random stuff here. So this takes my Atari 2600 collection to about 84 games now, and I feel like it's fairly complete. I don't feel like I need to go out and try to add any more. If I come across some that are cheap, I'll add them. So those are my pickups for this month, and I also want to say that I figured out how to publish my entire video game collection online. So down below in the show notes, there's a link if you want to check out my entire video game collection. I basically update that when I get them. It's a cool little application I use on my Mac that basically allows you to hold up the barcode of any game, and it just scans it and it adds it to it. So you don't have to type in anything. You just literally just hold up your case and it adds it to your collection, and then one button pushes to the web. So it's pretty slick. If you want to know what that application is or any of that sort of stuff, leave a comment down below and I'd be happy to tell you about it. I want to thank you for subscribing to my show, and thanks for watching. Take care.